At least 15 murdered, dozens more injured. A Hanukkah party in Sydney turned into a massacre site. Today we expose how Globalize the Intifada stopped being a slogan and became a body count. And from Gaza to Australia to the UN, the lies about the war in Gaza are collapsing and the receipts are everywhere. We're unpacking it all now on The Quad. Welcome back to The Quad on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and we have an amazing panel of ladies with us today. Unfortunately, not our leader, Fleur Hassan, who is out of town, but she'll be back with us soon. We have Shama Meshtali back with us, a veteran of The Quad, the founder of the Emma Lazarus Institute, and a well-respected policy advisor, especially on the Abraham Accords. We also have the co-founder of Chokhmat Nashim, Shoshana Keats-Jaskal, and we have with us today Rashi El-Maliah, originally from Australia. She is a marketing and branding expert and also responsible for the name Waze, so I'm told. Good to have you with us. It's not a great day, as I don't need to tell a lot of you as well as our viewers. We are in the immediate aftermath of yet another terror attack, a brutal, savage attack on the Jewish community in Australia. What we saw at Bondi Beach was the massacre of Jews once again at a Hanukkah event, a family event where dozens were injured and at least 15 so far have been killed. Two terrorists of Pakistani origin opened fire, firing more than 70 shots in the span of a few minutes at the community that was celebrating the first night of Hanukkah. Really devastating scenes happening here. But Rashi, I want to start with you, someone from Australia. I mean, what are your thoughts on this tragic event and what we're seeing?
This is not the Australia that we grew up in. Australia is a very chill place. The community, including, by the way, the Arab and Muslim community from when I was young, are not the same as Arab and Muslim community there today. The Arabs and the Muslims who came in the 1940s until the 1980s came to escape Islamism. The recent wave of Islamists who came brought jihadism with them, and they have completely changed the culture in Australia. And the last 2 years of legitimizing and encouraging and fueling actual call to actions for genocide on the streets of Australia has absolutely changed and made it legitimate to duck shoot Jews.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you bring that up because one of the things that we kept seeing yesterday in the aftermath of this attack is the footage from October 8th. Take a look at some of the footage we have from Australia.
I'm smiling. I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage. It's a day of happiness. It's a day of pride. It's a day of victory. This is the day we've been waiting for. Where's the Jews? 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 Where's the Jews?
Now, as you can see, very open anti-Semitism, calls for violence against the Jewish community, in some cases very explicit calls to violence. And this is something that has happened since then. I mean, there have been protests, not just in Australia, but we see them in the UK, we see them in the US and Canada, and they all have the same calls to action, globalizing the Intifada. Shoshana, what does that mean? I mean, is this wave of Jew hatred that we're seeing across our communities globally related to this, in your view?
I don't understand how anyone can not relate the two. For me, it's like A plus B equals C or 1 + 1 = 2. Like, obviously, if you're screaming globalize the Intifada, and we all know what the Intifada was, the numerous Intifadas were, the idea that someone, and this is going on, by the way, I think Bret Stephens in the New York Times said this is basically what happened in Sydney is globalizing the Intifada. And then you have all these people on X saying, how could you say that? That's so Islamophobic. And I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what was it? Explain. They were offended by Hanukkah? Like, what was it if it wasn't Globalize the Intifada? And that, to me, is the scariest part, that people can actually say one has nothing to do with the other. Clearly, there's a direct line between screaming on the streets for the Intifada, death to the IDF, and shooting Jews on Bondi Beach. There's no question.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, they're chanting Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, referring to the massacre of the Jews of Khaybar in Saudi Arabia in the time of Muhammad. They're calling, there were chants in the video that we saw of, where are the Jews, F the Jews. Like, they're not talking about Israeli policy. They're not talking about even the IDF or the prime minister, any of these things. They're talking about Jews. And we see time and time again that it's the Jewish communities that are being targeted, not Israelis even, the Jewish communities.
Totally.
Shama, you've seen a lot of this in New York and elsewhere. What's your take?
Well, in a great subversion of indigeneity, when the Jews become a symbol of whiteness, of supremacy, of dominance, of capitalism, of Western values, of course, it will start with Jews, but it will not end there. And this is the plan of the Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm glad to see some action in the United States, some movement towards banning the Muslim Brotherhood and sanctioning the terrorist organizations and individuals that are associated with the MB, as well as financing for their terrorist activities across the world. But it's not enough because, as we know, this is a very sophisticated organization that has been adapting across the world in a very transnational, multifaceted manner. And in their latest stint, of course, they invited a bunch of Republicans, including influencers and congressmen and journalists, to the Doha Forum as a way to sell them, to launder the same ideology, but mask it under a Republican America First
America First in
outfit. Exactly. And this is the concern, is that how this ideology will keep metastasizing and transforming in ways that make it really difficult for foreigners, for Westerners, even for Americans to identify where it's really coming from. But this is the same pattern. As a Moroccan who grew up in Morocco, I have seen this take place. I've seen them consolidate power. I've seen them create turmoil in the street. I've seen them attack women, attack Jews, Jewish communities, whatever that's left of the community. There was a big terrorist attack in May of 2006, which coincidentally was the day that the police force was established in Morocco. So the dates that they use are always symbolic, and I'll leave it to you to speak on Australia. But this is a pattern. They come into power, they subvert, they change, they wear different cloaks so that they're unrecognizable, and that is how they consolidate their power and their ideology, and that is how they keep subverting what it means to be an indigenous person, because they pretend to be the defenders of indigenous people when they're actually the supremacist force that is coming for all indigenous people. And that's why it starts by this idea that white people aren't indigenous, so it's okay if they're killed. Jews aren't indigenous, it's okay if they're gassed. And so we have to be really, really careful. And I hope I'm seeing some positive reactions. Actually, my silver lining from the horrific attack at Bondi Beach yesterday is that people are waking up. There are more Muslims from the Arab world that are speaking that I've seen since October 7th, and there are more Europeans and more Americans and Australians that are saying, enough, this is not how this is going to go. We're going to defend our states. But it's also really dangerous because they love this environment of civil turmoil and creating basically instability so much that you'll have different minority groups picking up guns, creating sub-militias, and then that leads to sub-states, which we have in Hezbollah, we have in other places like Sudan today.
Well, one of the things that I thought was so interesting about the responses is, I agree with you, I also saw a lot more than I usually see, I think. I saw a lot of responses from the Arab Muslim world speaking out very strongly against this awful terror attack. But in the West, I kind of saw the opposite. I mean, I don't know I would love to hear like what you guys thought about the responses that we saw from different leaders. I guess we'll start with you. I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, but Albanese, the Prime Minister of
spoiling my
Australia.
scumbag.
Oh, okay.
We're going to get to my scumbag.
Yes.
We'll definitely get to my scumbag. But I actually saw a response this morning that was very interesting from this Muslim lady in a hijab in the UAE. And that was actually something which that's the one that needs to get out, because I don't care too much for the individual here and the individual there. But the UAE is a wonderful example, because UAE has registered certain organizations as terrorist organizations that even in Australia, there's actually one that was behind the funding of this, they've now said, the Islamic Relief Foundation, which is Brothers in Arms, which is actually an organization that claims to be a humanitarian homeless shelter, which is not. It is actually a part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is funded by the Islamic Relief Foundation, which is funded partly by the Australian government, for goodness sake. It has been called a terrorist organization in Israel. Let's put that aside for, bias. In the UAE, they're not allowed to operate in the UAE. And that's the reason I can go to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which I do often and quite like, because it's safe and they understand the difference. And in Australia and in America, they're tiptoeing around this, and they're not actually saying that these people are funded by and recruited by Adam Ismail, I think that's his name. Seriously, this blonde-looking imam who's
the one who radicalized the terrorists.
The guy, today and yesterday. And these people are deeply integrated. The Muslim Brotherhood was established in Australia in the 1960s. I didn't know that. I grew up in Australia, naively not knowing that there were terror cells going around me, and they have radicalized universities. The Muslim Student Association was established in the 1960s in Australia. I went to university. I didn't know about them. They're so smart. And they've been these terror cells, and now they came out after October 7, ready to cause havoc.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we also see the same thing in the U.S. on campuses, and only now we're starting to see a little movement on this with the designation of CARE, which is a Muslim Brotherhood organization, unindicted co-conspirator in 9/11, or not 9/11, sorry. Yeah, 9/11. Yeah, 9/11. Very bad actors, I would say. But it is good that we're starting to see a little bit of momentum. I just don't understand how Australia, a democratic country that respects freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, how this happened.
It's worse
how it came, under their nose.
One way it happened is that the media is not an unbiased media. There's hardly any balanced media views. That's a big part of it. But honestly, Australians are very trusting, naive, never had any enemies. I mean, the biggest enemies you have are the spiders and the sharks. Like, there's really no reason to be fearful of anything. The first time Australians were really fearful.
The spiders and sharks are scary in Australia. So
I still do check my shoes in Israel to make sure there's no spider in them, even though there's unlikely to be. But that's what happened. It would just caught Australians completely off guard. And you mentioned symbolism, and that is absolutely the case. The location and the day and the time were fully symbolic. It is not by chance that they chose iconic places to have the marches on October 8 or 9 outside the Opera House with the backdrop of Australia's most famous iconic landmark. The marches with terrorist organizations chanting for the murder of Jews on the Harbour Bridge, and now Bondi Beach. I mean, there's no more. And not to mention, Sunday afternoon is the holy day for Christians, Jews, everybody in Australia. That's the holy day. It's the holy day. So to have a children's event on a Sunday afternoon, on the first day of Hanukkah, at an iconic site, couldn't have been more ideal for their invasion.
But it's not like this is the first thing to happen in Australia. A synagogue was burned down, and cars and houses, Jewish houses, were graffitied, and many marches. And the Jewish community in Australia has been saying for a long time now, wake up, like, protect us, do something. And finally, the Australian, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they were my hero, because they actually said that Iran, I don't remember exactly what they did. The IRGC, right, was to blame for that attack. And even Israel now is coming out saying, just so you know, it's clear that this is being
state-sponsored.
It's Shoshana, it is much worse than that. In July, they established this envoy for anti-Semitism in Australia with this very impressive woman, Gillian Siegel, who really knows what she's doing. And of course, when they announced it, they said there's also going to be one for Islamophobia. There is no risk and no danger to the Muslim community at all. There are no guards outside mosques in Australia or outside Muslim schools. And she came out with, this organization came out with a very, very responsible, professional, and specific list of action items, including security at Jewish events, including stopping the calls for jihad and genocide of Jews, including defunding organizations that sponsor blood libels. Nothing was done. Crickets. And I even heard one of the news announcements actually say that they were actually withholding some of the funding that hasn't gone through. And so that's what's happened. There was an awakening. There were specific calls to action. Israel begged and pleaded, from the Mossad to the Prime Minister, begged and pleaded, do something. And they did nothing.
Yeah. Ironically, they need a special envoy to protect Muslims from Islamists.
Yes.
So this is the problem. It's not about Jews versus Muslims, white versus brown, oppressor versus oppressed. It's about a supremacist ideology that has really mutated across time, has taken the worst of different supremacist ideologies from Europe and the Middle East, and has become this force, this monstrous force that's coming for human civilization, and it does not discriminate. It's coming for pluralistic values, for freedom of religion, tolerance, coexistence, the freedom to be in the beach, the freedom to swim in the beach in your bathing suit. And that is, unfortunately, the power of these Islamists, is that they subvert through their propaganda war, so that it's very hard for people to recognize that it's not the average Muslim like Ahmed al-Ahmed, who ended up saving Jews yesterday. It's not him. It is the people who are monopolizing the discourse about the Middle East and about Islam, and that are powered by this multi-billion-dollar industry, media industry, particularly Al Jazeera, which my recommendation for the Australian government is shut down Al Jazeera, because this is what's creating an environment that makes Jews and non-Jews, including moderate Muslims, unsafe in your country, and that's subverting the very values upon which Australia was founded.
You know, I was in an interview yesterday about this incident on GB News, and they asked me about, well, how do you justify the fact that cracking down on the Muslim Brotherhood and cracking down on extremism is going to contribute to Islamophobia? And I told them, who do you think is being most impacted by these extremist Muslims, by the Muslim Brotherhood? These aren't pro-Muslim, as in the people, organizations. They're Islamist organizations that give cover to terrorism. And they have these governments so fleeced. I mean, they have them they genuinely believe that banning the Muslim Brotherhood is Islamophobic. Like, the Muslim Brotherhood does not and should not represent your average Muslim.
100%.
Like, and the fact that other Arab states have banned the Muslim Brotherhood is a perfect evidence of that. I'm very concerned about the government's plural responses to these incidents that we've seen. Unfortunately, it's not the only such incidents we've seen. I know, Shoshana, we were talking before the show about how different Hanukkah events and Christmas, we'll get to that, but Hanukkah events have been targeted by extremists. I mean, what are you hearing?
Well, Matthew Nuriel, who is obviously a dear friend and was a former
Guest host.
Thank you,
Yes.
guest host here. He actually made it very easy list for us. And then after I read his list, I see more. So 16 Jews murdered in an anti-Semitic mass shooting in Australia. 2 students murdered at Brown University by a shooter targeting a professor who teaches Jewish studies. That just came out. Jewish family home shot 20 times in California. Hanukkah concert in Amsterdam violently disrupted by anti-Semitic pro-jihadists. And I just read that all of the mezuzahs in this 391 apartment building unit, were torn down last night. So when we talk about globalizing the Intifada, what was it, 4 countries I just read? The United States, Amsterdam's not a country, but you know what I mean? Canada and Australia. I mean, the Intifada has been globalized.
And
like, I don't know what we're...
It's also the Christians in Berlin. And
Exactly, the Christmas markets. You're right. The Christmas markets in Germany. Yeah.
Countless plots have been foiled already when it comes to these Christmas markets. Some cities didn't do the Christmas markets at all as a result of this. And we know in previous years there have been numerous terror attacks, especially in Germany. And then we most recently saw that Paris had canceled their New Year's Eve celebration
they
due
can't
to this. They
guarantee-
can't guarantee safety.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what does it say about our societies in the West that they're so unable to crack down on extremism?
Unwilling.
That they can, unwilling, yes, that they can't even hold like their cultural events. I mean, it's crazy.
That's the point,
This
right?
is why I feel so much safer here, because I think there's no denial about the threats that surround us, and we put systems in place that understands those risks and actually prioritize the safety and the resilience of the people. That's the number one social contract that any government has with its citizens. Unfortunately, that social contract is really being tested all over the West. And it's, ironically, countries like the UAE or Bahrain or Saudi or Morocco truly understand this because they have been through this way. You know, we have seen it in the last century across the Middle East and North Africa. The other thing I want to say is the other irony I want to point out is that a lot of these terrorist plots would not be foiled and stopped without cooperation with Israeli intelligence.
We know even this attack that the Mossad did warn Australia and that they didn't do anything.
So the hypocrisy comes then from these states and these governments who are calling out Israel for alleged genocide and starvation and recognizing a Palestinian state way too prematurely without having any conditions on the ground that can guarantee the radicalization and coexistence with the Jewish state. And at the same time, their entire campaigns wouldn't survive if it wasn't for cooperation with Israel and Israeli intelligence.
Well, you know, we have also another war going on in Sudan, which weirdly relates to everything that we're seeing in the West right now because of that Muslim Brotherhood issue. And one of the things I find so interesting about how the Muslim Brotherhood has been operating in Western countries is like what you alluded to with the fact every time we have to deal with anti-Semitism, we must also deal with Islamophobia, despite the fact that it's not proportionate statistically, that the number of attacks that have been carried out.
Wasn't the number one victim of 9/11 the aunt who
Yes.
didn't feel safe wearing a on the subway?
I heard that somewhere. Yeah, I heard that. But we see this over and over again, the distraction, the diversion to another issue in order ultimately to protect themselves as in the Muslim Brotherhood, not, of course, Muslims who they do not actually care about. What's going on in Sudan?
It's the same plot, the same narrative. Sudan has been going through a horrific war since April 2023. The war really happened after a coup that aimed to slow down the development of a new civil Sudan after the transitional government was appointed to reflect some of the diversity of Sudan. It included 4 women in government. It had a minister of justice from Darfur who actually championed the Abraham Accords and really wanted active cooperation with Israel and with the Abraham Accords countries. And unfortunately, the military coup and the war happened to derail that process, which the Abraham Accords at the end of the day are a process of moderation for the region. And so the Islamists understood that they would have to attack in order to keep power. And so Islamists from the old guard, from the army that have been deeply entrenched in Sudan, let's not forget that Osama bin Laden was hosted in Sudan and offered privileges and a refuge to develop this ideology from the safety of Khartoum and invited by the Muslim Brotherhood leader in Sudan called At-Turabi. And unfortunately, we are witnessing basically the same war that Israel is fighting against Islamist extremism unfold in Sudan. And because there are no Jews in Sudan left, we don't hear about it. There's actual genocide in Sudan. It's the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world. It's the biggest displacement crisis in the world. However, we are seeing a propaganda war that's actually deflecting and evading, holding the Muslim Brotherhood in Sudan and these Muslim Brotherhood actors accountable. Instead, what they're doing, because Muslim Brotherhood media like Al Jazeera are so deeply entrenched, they are promoting the story that it's actually the UAE because of their relationship with Israel, and the United States that are
It all circles back to the Jews.
yeah, that are acting as a neo-colonial, genocidal, empire-based state that is only interested in Sudan because of the gold. And so that it becomes a story of what I call Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, this kind of ridiculed narrative only to fuel more conspiracy theories. And Iran is also behind that propaganda war, linking leaders from the UAE, particularly business leaders, to Jeffrey Epstein. So now we know exactly who's promoting the Jeffrey Epstein propaganda in the United States, precisely to erode trust between the media and government institutions and the people.
But I wish it was as easy as cutting off Al Jazeera, but they're much more sophisticated than that. They have mentioned in the Muslim Brotherhood 50 or 100-year plan, whatever it is, to conquer the West. They are deeply ingrained in many media organizations, from fake journalists all over the world to the BBC documentaries that are done by, sons of Hamas leaders, to Sky News in Australia is actually okay, but Sky News Britain, which actually also broadcasts in Australia, is no less than a spokesperson for Islamic extremism. And they both do what you said. They both hush the wars that are not their narrative, and they spread blood libels, knowing clearly that they're fake Hollywood. I mean, when there's a hand that is not connected to a body doing something, it's not real. You don't even need to check that. And so that's what's really happened. And then you have these women who are middle-aged, not really knowing something, tattooing their arms with terrible Arabic writings of, from the river to the sea, not knowing what they're doing, but they're giving votes to the leaders in Paris and London and Amsterdam and Toronto. And these people are literally voting in these people who are encouraging the migration of people who are coming with the said goal of conquering their land. They're not going to Muslim lands. They're coming to Toronto and that's why Paris is not having Christmas. And then they have the votes of all these people who are just sucked into this fake news that has been, I wish you could just cut off Al Jazeera, but they're way more,
They've really embedded themselves in a lot of these media organizations, and it's something that I've dealt with a lot on the Iran issue, because the voice in the Western media of what's happening in Iran, even Iranian dissidents, the people who show up on BBC, who show up on CNN, who show up on all the, at least American mainstream networks, are not people who are speaking in the voice of the Iranian people. They're people who are finding a way to legitimize the Islamic Republic regime itself. And the same thing is happening with Muslim Brotherhood actors, that they're not representing what's actually in the interest of, Arab Muslims in the Middle East, or in the case of, Gaza Palestinians, they're representing radicalism and trying to sanitize that to a Western audience. It's very concerning. But before we move to the scumbags and heroes, I do want to touch a little bit on what's happening in Gaza, because there have been several reports that have come out in recent weeks that I think are very critical and related to exactly what we're talking about, this manipulation of the narrative, despite the fact that they have no evidence for the things that they're claiming. One of the most common that we heard throughout this war has been that there's a man-made starvation or a man-made famine against the people of Gaza, and that Israel is intentionally starving Palestinians in Gaza, despite the fact that aid was going through to the Palestinians. And just last week, there was a video released showing showing an entire storage facility filled with baby formula, which was one of the things that they frequently used to bash Israel over. Oh, the babies are starving. The babies are starving. Turns out the formula was being transferred into Gaza, and that Hamas was taking it all, surprise, surprise, putting it in storage and not giving it to the people. So Shoshana, I know you've been very outspoken about the situation in Gaza, the fact that they're, ultimately willing to sacrifice their own children. Yep. I mean, what's your response to this footage that came out just last week?
I'm not surprised, but I'm angry that it's not more widely known. I'm angry that it's not on the cover of the New York Times. I'm angry that the UN, that Al Jazeera, that all the people who pretend to care about Palestine and Gaza aren't furious and fuming at Hamas. I mean, Hamas starved babies. that should be the headline. Hamas starved babies. That should be the headline everywhere, and it's not. And for me, it just proves over and again what we already know, what we've talked about every week around this table, is that it doesn't matter. It's not about Gazans. It's not about Palestinians. It's about the Jews. It's about ending the Jews. It's about ending Israel. It's like, if you ask any one of these people who are marching up and down, or any of these people who are screaming on X, what is your solution? What does this river to the sea look like? Either they have zero answers because they don't have a brain in their head, or they just say, well, Israel needs to go. Well, what does that mean? They don't have an answer. So you're not even having this is not a conversation. This is nothing new. I am just angry that also, by the way, that the 56, 7 Arab Muslim nations aren't condemning this. Like, these babies starved because of Hamas, which you gave money to, Qatar, which you gave money to, Iran. Why is nobody holding anyone responsible? To me, it's just sad.
I guess they view it as difficult to take responsibility, and it's easier to ignore. It's very painful when you see these things and that it's actually costing in human lives.
It's exactly the reality. It's the same reason that Amnesty took so long to finally, 2 years later, come out with a statement that says it's really quite bad to massacre and rape and kidnap babies and grandparents in their beds. It's like, it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, it took them a long time, and that's why, because it didn't suit their narrative, and they found every way to hush it. And it is, I don't understand how there's not one editor-in-chief somewhere who says, hey, front page, hey, headline news, regardless of what you think.
The human race has lost their spine. Like, it's
the starvation lies also are a way to isolate the Jewish community even more, because from our point of view, outside of Israel, what happened is we went through like the first wave of betrayals and sort of being canceled and being spoken over after October 7th. And then this past summer, with all the starvation allegations, was another awakening of that, another wave of betrayal. And it's been really horrific. And it targeted also, you know, Jews who became more anti-Zionist and more critical, who just felt like they could not legitimize this story or these images that were circulating on the New York Times. And so it's really also about stripping every aspect of safety and safety nets that Jews and rational people who believe in human civilization have in those society.
And increasingly Christians as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we do have to move to our scumbags of the week. Scumbags and heroes, of course. Shama, I'd love to hear from you who you have for us. I'm sure it's going to be interesting this week because there's no shortage of scumbags after the incident that happened.
Absolutely. So continuing our theme on the propaganda war, my scumbag is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Qatar, who issued a statement basically blaming nobody for the attack in Bondi Beach, and literally saying the attack on Bondi Beach, not on the Jewish community that was peacefully celebrating Hanukkah. Not saying anything about anti-Semitism, about Jews, about terrorism, and of course, manipulating the facts in a way that serves the Muslim Brotherhood. And this is really important because we're being sold a story about Qatar potentially changing, potentially moderating, potentially diversifying away from the Muslim Brotherhood. But it's really hard to believe that when the facts on the ground are saying otherwise. So let's move on to heroes so that we're not just negative. My hero.
Wait, we have to go through all the scumbags first. Oh, okay. I appreciate your positivity. Oh, we have more scumbags to address.
Oh, I forgot to go.
Yeah, Shoshana, who is your scumbag?
I'm going big this week, okay? I'm talking about scumbags in the global sense. Every single rat fink that has said river to the sea or globalize the Intifada, whether you were on campus in New York or the streets of London or the monuments of Paris or the Opera House in Sydney, every single one of you is responsible for what happened at Bondi Beach. Every single one of you is responsible for what happened in Toronto and LA and New York, because you are pretending to be on the side of good when you are actually promoting evil. And if you think you're not responsible, I suggest you do a cheshbon nefesh, is what we say in Hebrew, when you really take into account the things that you do and that you say, because everything you say has meaning. And if you can't stand behind the words that you say and you don't even know what it means to globalize the Intifada, you shouldn't be opening your mouth because you are the reason there are dead 10-year-olds and 87-year-old Holocaust survivors in Sydney, Australia. You.
Great. Blood on their hands.
Rashi, who is your scumbag of the week? I know you alluded to it earlier.
Yeah, Albo, Prime Minister Albanese in Australia. Good job. He has encouraged, fueled, and legitimized Jew hatred in Australia. There has been vile calls for genocide of Jews weekly in Australia. And he has not only done nothing about it, but in fact encouraged it. He's enabled people in government to walk in with kafirs in the parliament. He has had a neo-Nazi call for the death of Jews released without any consequences 2 days later. He has received lists of action items of what to do, instruction from the Mossad. He's done nothing, not to mention, of course, the chummy with Arafat in the 1990s, but let's put that all behind us. But this week, he outdid himself. After the Bondi Massacre, this was his announcement. His written announcement was, the scenes in Bondi are shocking and distressing. Police and emergency responders are on the ground working to save lives. My thoughts are with every person affected. What's missing from that? Jews affected, children affected. It was a family event on a public beach, attacking Jews. You could have mentioned that in your statement. He's a disgrace and he is an active participant in the murder of Jews in Bondi Beach this week. And he's my scumbag.
I see we're very much on a theme with our scumbags, and mine is following along with that theme, but moving over to New York. Mamdani, I know he's been a popular scumbag on this show, but he is my scumbag this week in particular, and I could spend an hour talking about all the reasons he's a scumbag. But for time purposes, today I'm just focusing on his response to the terror attack in Australia. He issued a fairly long post actually condemning it and talking about the fact that anti-Semitism is a problem and oh, how horrific that there were children who were murdered and there are Holocaust survivors that are murdered, and he stands against anti-Semitism.
Sure.
Really? Because your entire life you have been an anti-Israel activist with Students for Justice in Palestine, also, by the way, remotely, albeit, but related to the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think most relevant to what we saw yesterday, which was the globalization of the Intifada, Mamdani has refused repeatedly to condemn calls to globalize the Intifada. In fact, he participated in protests where they were calling for Intifada repeatedly. So we're not buying it. And my favorite part of his post was actually the replies on X, because almost every single one was like, F you, F you, F you, F you, like 35 tweets in a row, and not like random bots, like actual people, public figures, people who speak about these issues, because it's just such gaslighting.
Yes.
It's such gaslighting. It's repulsive. And it literally turns my stomach to see these people who, you know, a few days ago would accuse Israel of committing genocide, or did, in the case of Mamdani, from the White House. And then they act like, oh, I'm against anti-Semitism. I'm against people shooting up a Jewish community event and murdering kids. You're not.
Right.
You're not. You didn't even condemn Globalize the Intifada. You don't get to sit there and pretend that you're against anti-Semitism now. So Mamdani, you're my scumbag of the week for this reason, but for many others as well. But for this week, for this reason. Yeah.
I can't look at those tweets or those statements from these people who like say globalizing. I can't look at them talking about, oh, what was me? I can't believe what happened. Bitch, yeah, you can. This is what you wanted to happen. That's how I feel every time I see
Rashida
these
Tlaib, Zoran Mamdani, Ilhan Omar, all of these people who've spent years now demonizing Jews and the state of Israel and take zero responsibility when that is actually manifested in action. It's despicable, just despicable. But on a more positive note, to follow Shama's lead, let's talk about the heroes this week. And there also is no shortage of heroes, in fact, especially in the aftermath of the attack in Bondi Beach. Shama, who do you have?
Yes, the lights that really keep us surviving in these times. My hero of the week, of yesterday, is Arsen Ostrovsky, who is a human rights lawyer, a great defender of the Jewish people in the state of Israel, and who had spent his last 13 years in Israel after moving from Australia. And he had recently moved back to Australia to help the Jewish community that he's from and he's a part of defend itself against raging and rising anti-Semitism, and he gets caught in this Hanukkah family celebration with his wife and 2 kids. And the terrorist starts shooting, and he realized that his kids are far away, and of course you can imagine the terror of that moment. And so he's rushing to get closer to his kids, and a bullet basically grazes over his head. And so probably missed him by a centimeter, if not less. And he was undeterred, determined, relentless, took a picture from the scene of the massacre. And that's when I think we realized that this is exactly like what unfolded at Nova.
Yeah, the scenes that looked exactly. When I first received footage, my first thought was, why are people resending videos from the Nova Festival? Did something happen with, one of the survivors or something? And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's happening again. And I have to say, like, that feeling, it's the worst feeling in the world. It's the worst feeling in the world after everything that we've been through. It's so triggering. And the part I think that was even more upsetting is that that's exactly why they're doing it. Like, Hanukkah is a festival of light over darkness. And that's exactly why they're targeting it. But Arsen is a great hero, definitely. Shoshana, who is your hero?
Also related to Australia for what happened in Sydney. My hero's name is Ahmed El Ahmed. And he is the 43-year-old father of 2, a fruit shop owner, if my sources are correct, who tackled one of the shooters, one of the terrorists, from behind and unarmed him, which was like, I'm watching this come as it's coming out, and I'm like, that's the guy. That's the guy everybody should be. That's the guy everybody should be. And nobody knew he was, obviously, until the interests are talking about it. And I'm pleased to say that he's also a Muslim. I think I was told from Syria, because that's who we're really fighting against, right? We're not fighting against Muslims. We're not fighting against people who believe or people who are good. We're fighting about people who want death and hate and chaos, as you mentioned before. We're fighting against the extremists. And only when we stand together, and we really have to stand together. I would love to do the quad in Sydney for like a month on the beach, on Bondi Beach, like out there. I want to be as Jewish as possible next to people like Ahmed, who like can be our guests and show the world how it's supposed to be, because that is a hero. And by the way, you don't have to tackle a gunman to be a hero. You can speak out. You can stand with your Jewish neighbors. You can go to a synagogue. You can go to their Hanukkah. There's 8 nights of Hanukkah. We have 6 more to go. So join your Jewish neighbors wherever they are and be a hero.
I think he really did show extraordinary courage. I mean, that video was remarkable. I thought maybe he was like a policeman who like was not in uniform or something.
An Israeli.
Yeah, or perhaps an Israeli who was familiar with what was going on in such a terrible environment, but really an actions of a true hero. And he actually was injured very badly in that he got shot twice. He's recovering in the hospital, and they expect him to recover, but remarkable courage, even in the face of terrible adversity. Your hero?
My hero is a shout out to CSG, which is an organization in Australia. Also, there are hubs around the world. The community of security, the community security group, basically, they are regular Australians, regular South Africans, regular British, who train real seriously. Don't get confused that the regular means that they're not well trained. So beware, you don't want to be on the wrong side of them. But these people get out there, but put themselves between the Jewish community and all the threats to the Jewish community at every synagogue, at every school, at every event. And they do that because the local governments can't or won't protect the Jews. And one of them, I believe, was actually shot yesterday in the shoulder. I think he's doing okay. I've heard from some people somewhere related. I don't know the exact details. But these people are actually really heroes. And a shout out to all of you who miss your own Shabbat dinners, who miss your own family events, and who are always out there protecting the community, the lawyers, the doctors, the students, the athletes, everybody, regular people who go out there and train hard and work hard to protect the Jewish community. Thank you.
They very much are heroes, not just in Australia, but you also have the CST in the UK and in South Africa. It's funny, when I was in South Africa, I had an event at the Jewish Federation there, and they were doing a training, and I freaked out because I thought like, oh my gosh, there's like a terror attack or something, because they were doing like a full-on drill, like it was like an army base. So much noise, so much. I mean, they are serious. Like, do not mess with those guys.
Yep.
But my hero this week is, I guess, a bittersweet hero. Alex Klaitman, who is a Holocaust survivor, who died in the attack at Bondi Beach. And the reason that he is my hero isn't just because he survived the worst atrocity that has occurred to the Jewish people, but also because in the Bondi Beach attack, he actually sacrificed his life in order to protect his wife, who he pushed out of the way and literally laid on top of her, and ultimately took a bullet for it. And this is an ultimate act of heroism, and I'm sure that he will be very sorely missed, obviously by his wife, Larissa, but also by all of the community. A great loss, but nonetheless a hero who deserves to be recognized by all for what he did on that terrible day.
It's so painful that we have to eulogize Holocaust survivors at these, in Denver, I believe also the person who was killed was a Holocaust survivor. It's never again within our lifetime it happened, and it's a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. It's excruciating. Yep. It's really this should not be happening.
Yeah,
it should not be happening.
All right, well, all very worthy heroes, to quote Fleur. But we do have to wrap up for today. So thanks again for joining us on The Quad. We'll be back next week, as usual, The Quad on JNS.